A boy named Joseph is napping on the rocking chair, but a monster silently unlocks the window, reaches through the opening in the door, and extends its fingernail to kill the sleeping Joseph, but its fingernail doesn't make it. The monster opens the window and silently walks in. Just as it's about to lunge at Joseph, the boy pulls the rope as he snaps awake and cages the monster. Earlier, the world is nearing its end, and we see a man named Paul is looting, taking everything he can take from a war-torn and abandoned city. Paul decides to get out and sneaks through the alleyways. Once out of the city, Paul goes to a dilapidated house in the countryside where he's hidden his infant twin sons for their safety. After holding them, Paul assures them everything is okay and sighs in relief, having survived this day to be with his sons. 15 years later, Paul's sons are teenagers now, and the three live in a fortified farmhouse along with their dog Rocco.
You wanna play?
Yeah.
There's Joseph. He's a good and reasonable son who always heeds his father's orders. That's Thomas. He's impulsive and sometimes reckless. Now, the sun is about to set, and Paul is breathlessly waiting for Thomas to return. If he's not back before sunset, there's a big chance the monsters will eat him for dinner. Thomas finally returns, and Paul scolds him for being late before the two rush inside. Once inside, Paul and his sons lock all the doors and barricade the windows to keep out the monsters and intruders. Now that they're safe and secure, it's dinner time. The family says grace and starts eating. Paul tells Thomas not to be late again. Joseph mocks him and asks him what's so special about the Rose Farm that he spends almost all of the day there. That pisses off Thomas, and the two brothers start bickering. Their bickering is about to turn physical, but Paul breaks it up and tells his sons off for their behavior, reminding them that only animals act like this. He also reminds them that they are men. After dinner, Paul looks through the window to see if anything is out there. He then sits on the rocking chair to watch his sons play chess.
I'm missing a few pieces.
Just then, a bang on the door disturbs their peace. Something is trying to break the door open. To stop him or whatever is out there, Paul and Thomas block the door while this something keeps on banging. Eventually, it stops and goes away. The next morning, Paul finds the door to the house damaged. He needs to make another one. Along with his sons, Paul finds some logs they can make a new door out of. While Thomas chops up the logs, Paul finds Joseph working on something else other than the door. That something is a car. However, Joseph can't get it to start because he doesn't have all the tools for it. Paul lights a cigarette and comes across a piece of paper. On the paper is written a quote about a new species showing up to cleanse the earth of the virus and the human race who caused this virus. Paul reflects on it and finds it to be not true. He tells Joseph there is still hope that the air and water will get cleaner as the years go by and the virus will die. He's also hopeful that some heroes will show up one day and save them from the monsters. Paul then takes a look at the car. After just swapping the relays, the car starts, much to Joseph's joy, who thought he needed more tools for it. Proud of his son, Paul calls him a genius for making that car.
What'd you do?
I just swapped the relays.
Paul then takes him and gives him a driving lesson. At first, Joseph struggles, and Thomas makes fun of him. However, Joseph soon learns fast and gets the hang of it as he drives them home. Once home, Thomas decides to go to the Rose Farm, but Paul stops him and tells him to go with Joseph and collect more wood planks down the river so they can shield their windows at night. On the way to the river, Thomas starts bickering with Joseph for no good reason, calling Joseph reckless and telling him he can't take care of himself by himself. Not wanting his brother to take care of him, Joseph tells Thomas to go wherever he wants. Thomas disobeys his father's orders, decides to head for the Rose Farm, and tells his brother where to meet him by sunset. Alone, Joseph drives to the river, while Thomas rushes to the Rose Farm. Thomas arrives at the Rose Farm to be warmly welcomed by Mrs. and Mr. Rose. Not only does Thomas help the Roses with their farm, but also he has a romantic relationship with their daughter Charlotte, who then asks him out. Meanwhile, Paul fixes the door and has a smoke break by the waterfall. At the same time, Joseph arrives at the river to salvage. He goes inside a room but gets attacked by insects. Overwhelmed, Joseph rushes out. On the other hand, Thomas has a wonderful time playing the crappy apocalypse game with Charlotte.
Do you want to play Crappy Apocalypse?
As they sit on a tree branch, the two come up with some fun theories about the end of the world. Noticing the sun is about to set, Thomas realizes he has to meet up with his brother to go back home. Joseph is about to leave the river but struggles to start his car. After a few attempts, the engine finally starts and Joseph drives to meet Thomas. Meanwhile, Thomas rushes to meet his brother but accidentally falls into a cave and ends up stuck there. Joseph arrives at the spot where he agreed to meet up with his brother, but Thomas never shows up. Thinking Thomas is headed home on foot, Joseph drives there. However, as he gets home, Joseph finds that Thomas is not there. Worried about his missing son, Paul sets out to look for him and has Joseph guard the house. Joseph then says sorry, thinking it was his fault Thomas went missing. Paul denies that and blames himself for it. Thomas awakes and finds himself deep in a dark cave. As he tries looking for a way out, he gets attacked by a monster. Paul hears the monster's voice and is alerted to Thomas's location. Thomas is getting cornered by the monsters, but his dad saves him in time. After finding a way into the cave, Paul hugs his son and checks if he's okay. Since it's dangerous to move at night, Paul decides to stay in the cave until dawn and lights a fire to keep them warm for the night. Meanwhile, Joseph is napping on the rocking chair. A monster silently unlocks the window, reaches through, and extends its fingernail to kill the sleeping Joseph, but its fingernail doesn't make it. The monster opens the window and silently walks in. Just as it's about to lunge at Joseph, Joseph pulls the rope as he snaps awake and cages the monster. Now the monster has just fallen into his trap, and Joseph is overjoyed. However, the situation in the cave gets much worse when Paul starts hearing some weird sounds. Just then, the monsters dig a hole and are about to come from underneath. Just as Thomas realizes the monsters surround them from all sides, Paul has him back against the wall so he can plant a stick of dynamite into the hole. However, Paul accidentally blows himself up, killing the monsters in the process. Joseph snaps awake, worried. It's now dawn, and neither his father nor brother came back. Worried about them, Joseph sets out to find them. Thomas digs his way out of the cave, dragging out his unconscious father. Joseph finds his dog, Rocco. Rocco leads Joseph to Thomas and Paul. Joseph checks on his dad and finds him alive but fatally wounded. The two carefully put him in the car, and Joseph drives homeward fast. There, they put him in bed. Thomas asks Joseph if his dad will be okay. Joseph says no, not having any medicine for the fatally injured Paul. Shortly after, Thomas finds out about the monster Joseph caught last night. As Thomas bandages his father's hand, he lies and claims he killed some of the monsters in the cave. Joseph doesn't believe him. To prove himself right, Thomas decides to free the monster from the cage. Joseph doesn't want Thomas to do that, since he wants to conduct some studies on the monster. But Thomas doesn't listen and frees it. Frightened by the light, the monster runs to the corner of the room. Rocco tries attacking the monster, but the monster rages and lunges at Thomas. Joseph pins the monster and stabs it with a spear. Thomas decapitates it with an axe, finishing it off. Joseph is upset about this as he wants the monster alive to study its weaknesses. This way, they would be able to face the other monsters when they encounter them. Joseph dissects the monster's body and takes out its internal organs, hoping to discover something new to make a medicine out of. However, he doesn't find anything interesting. Thomas suggests taking Paul to the Rose Farm, where he'll get better care and medicine. Joseph doesn't think the Rose Farm would help them, because nobody would help anybody these days. However, upon Thomas's insistence, Joseph says yes and decides that it's still worth a try. After carefully putting their unconscious father in the car, the two brothers drive to the Rose Farm. After telling the Roses about what happened with their father, Thomas asks for medicine. Mrs. Rose says sorry, not having any medicine or room to spare for a heavily injured man like Paul, and Mr. Rose reassures Thomas that Paul is strong and that he'll pull through.
To pull through.
However, after Charlotte reminds her mother that they have some room to spare, Mrs. Rose decides that only Thomas can stay. That pisses off Joseph. Frustrated with Thomas, Joseph blames him for what happened to Paul and calls him out on being unruly and reckless. After all, Paul wouldn't have gotten so injured if Thomas obeyed him and didn't go to the Rose Farm. That pisses off Thomas, so he attacks his brother and is about to choke him, but he stops and lets go of his anger. Without saying anything, Joseph just gets up and drives home with his unconscious father in the back, while Thomas goes to stay with the Roses. There, Thomas eats and talks to Charlotte in her room. Just then, Mr. Rose comes in and tells Thomas to stay away from his daughter. On the way home, Joseph notices the sheep on the hill fleeing from God knows what. Once home, Joseph is surprised to find some mound leading to the house. The The monsters have been digging from under the ground to get inside the house. After dragging his father inside, Joseph looks around the house to find where the monsters are digging from. At the Rose farm, Thomas goes through the Rose's kitchen, looking for medicine to give to his father. Charlotte catches him. Thomas begs her to give him the medicine. If she doesn't give him the medicine, Paul will succumb to his wounds and die. A farmer working for the Roses named Hobson overhears them talking about the medicine. Charlotte is reluctant at first, but then goes behind her parents' backs and gives Thomas the medicine. Thomas rushes out of there, but is caught and held at gunpoint by Hobson, who overheard him talking to Charlotte. Seeing Thomas running, Hobson accuses him of stealing. Thomas swears that he didn't steal. After all, it was Charlotte who voluntarily gave him the medicine. Not believing Thomas, Hobson marches him to the bunkhouse. Meanwhile, Joseph tidies up the house and stumbles on a hole under the rug. That means the monsters dug under the house and they will attack at night. In other words, the house is no longer a safe place to be for Joseph and his father at night. At the Rose farm, the farmers working for the Roses bring Thomas to the bunkhouse and tie him up there.
We used to have things called laws.
Thinking Thomas is a thief, Hobson decides to blast Thomas's legs with the shotgun and has the farmers hold him. Thinking he's done for, Thomas screams for help and loudly calls Charlotte. Just as Hobson is about to execute the punishment, a monster interrupts him, pulls him underground, and takes the other farmer too. The Rose couple snaps awake, hearing the screams from the bunkhouse. Mr. Rose lights a candle and looks through the window, but finds nothing. He then decides to go out to take a look before a monster attacks him and causes him to drop the candle, setting the curtain on fire. The monster then attacks Mrs. Rose, but Mr. Rose gets it off her and gets attacked instead. Mrs. Rose runs out of the room to check on her daughter, but gets attacked and brutally killed by another monster. Charlotte gets out of her room and finds a blood trail leading to the bathroom. Finding a monster dozing on the tub, Charlotte screams in horror and shock, awakening the monster. More monsters attack the bunkhouse and more farmers get killed. Thomas tries to untie himself, but comes face to face with a monster. Before it can attack him, it is blasted in its face by Charlotte, who managed to make it out of her home alive. After Charlotte frees him, Thomas takes the medicine and gets out of the bunkhouse. Looking at her burning home, Charlotte is devastated and tells Thomas that her parents are dead. She has no one now. That leaves Thomas no choice but to go back to his home and meet up with his brother, Joseph. Meanwhile, Joseph tries his best to block the hole to prevent the monsters from getting in. Hearing a knock on the window, Joseph opens it for Thomas and Charlotte. After telling Joseph about what happened, Thomas gives him the medicine for their father and says sorry for what he did earlier. Since he can't fight the monsters alone, Joseph lets go of the tension and forgives his brother. After Paul was given the medicine, he awakes, much to his son's joy. Joseph tells him about their current situation and asks for advice. Of course, if the monsters will attack, then there's only one obvious option. That's why Paul only croaks one word, that is, fight.
Fight.
Since this house is not safe anymore, Joseph decides to lure the monsters in and blow it up to kill them all. That's why he gathers all the gasoline tanks they have and puts a freezer inside the room where he and the two can hide to shield themselves from the explosion. After Joseph pours gasoline all over the house, he plants a small stick of dynamite and puts a lit cigarette on it. When the cigarette burns out, the dynamite will blow up and the house will explode. After the trap is set up, noises are heard around the house. That means the monsters are here and they're going to attack. The first few monsters try to sneak in, but Thomas and Charlotte kill them. That alerts the monsters, so they start breaking in. Thomas and Charlotte run upstairs. The dynamite will explode shortly, so Thomas and Joseph move the freezer to Paul's room. Just the door is opened. Paul walks on his feet for the first time after the injury, takes the shotgun from Charlotte, and shoots the wooden floor to stop the monsters from getting in. As the brothers and Charlotte go into Paul's room, Paul comes face to face with a horde of monsters. One monster lunges at him, but Paul kills him with a bat. In one go, the whole horde tries attacking Paul. However, the floor breaks underneath them, and the horde ends up on the first floor. However, one monster makes it to the room and attacks Paul. Paul struggles to fight it off, but his two sons save him in time and stab the monster to death, while Paul proudly watches his two sons do so. Joseph and the other two hid in Paul's room. Joseph tells his father to come with them. However, Paul locks the three inside his room and decides to sacrifice himself to take out the monsters. Besides, there's no room in the freezer for a fourth person. That devastates Joseph as he shouts for his dad to come back, but Thomas tells him they have to hide in the freezer. Paul waits for the monsters to attack. As the gasoline Joseph pulled catches fire, Paul recalls the time he held his twin sons when they were infants. After the brothers and Charlotte hide, the monsters lunge at Paul in one go. Just then, the dynamite blows the whole place up, killing Paul and the monsters in the process, while the trio is safe inside the freezer.
Dad! Dad!
Alive and well, the three get out of the freezer, rush to the car, and drive away. Just then, a swarm of burning monsters survives the explosion and starts chasing them. Charlotte tries holding them off with the shotgun, but to no avail. Much to the trio's luck, all the monsters succumb to the fire and die before they can catch them. Now that they are safe, the three look at the stars with gratitude. The next morning, the three lay their families to rest and mourn them. The brothers reconcile, and Joseph gives the car keys to Thomas. Charlotte joins them, and the three become an inseparable team as they drive away to explore the world and find a new home where they can peacefully live.